In the blood-soaked annals of Roman imperial history, few tales resonate with such chilling horror and haunting beauty as that of Sporus, a youth whose destiny became irrevocably entwined with the monstrous reign of Emperor Nero. This is not merely a chronicle of political maneuvering or military triumphs, but a stark and disturbing exploration of power's capacity to obliterate individuality, transforming a human being into a grotesque reflection of imperial delusion. Sporus's narrative unfolds like a dark dream within the marble corridors of ancient Rome, where the boundaries between affection and obsession, dignity and degradation, dissolved under the emperor's mad gaze. The year was 65 AD. The Roman Empire, a behemoth stretching from the misty shores of Britannia to the sun-baked plains of the Euphrates, appeared invincible under the dominion of Nero, Claudius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus. However, behind the shimmering fad of the Domus Aurea, Nero's extravagant palace, a malignancy festered, poised to engulf an innocent young life. The emperor, barely past his mid-20s, had already scandalized Roman society with his flamboyant performances, extravagant building projects, and tempestuous relationships. The Great Fire of 64 AD had left Rome scarred and smoldering, and rumors of the emperor's descent into madness whispered through the streets like ash-laden winds. Within this realm of imperial excess and casual barbarity, young Sporus existed as a freedman within the imperial household, a status that, while nominally liberating, offered scant protection against the emperor's unbridled power. Historical accounts portray him as possessed of an almost otherworldly beauty, with delicate features and an elegant bearing that would tragically become both his defining characteristic and his ultimate downfall. The young man drew the attention of the imperial court, not through ambition or scheming, but simply by existing in a world where physical perfection served as a dangerous commodity. The turning point in Sporus's life occurred with the death of a woman. Poppaea Sabina, Nero's second wife and the tempestuous object of his affections, perished under suspicious circumstances in 65 AD. Some accounts suggest Nero himself was responsible, driven by a fit of rage to strike her while she carried his child, while other sources suggest complications from childbirth. Regardless, Poppaea's demise plunged Nero into a despair that would soon transmute into something far more sinister. His grief became an all-consuming obsession, a desperate quest to resurrect or replace the woman he professed to adore above all others. It was within this period of imperial mourning that fate cruelly delivered Sporus into Nero's sight. Whether by chance or by design, the young freedman caught the emperor's attention, who was immediately struck by a perceived resemblance to his departed wife. Ancient historians, including Cassius Dio and Suetonius, documented Nero's growing infatuation, his belief that Sporus's delicate features offered a chance to reclaim what death had snatched away. The emperor's grief-stricken mind conceived a plan so audacious and perverse that it would shock even the hardened veterans of imperial Rome. The decision, once made, was executed with brutal efficiency. Nero decreed that Sporus be castrated, permanently altering his body to conform to the emperor's twisted vision. This was not simply a physical violation, but a complete erasure of Sporus's masculine identity, transforming him into an object existing solely for Nero's psychological gratification. The procedure was carried out by imperial physicians, likely within the sterile confines of the palace, where screams could be muffled, and the boy's objections dismissed as the irrelevant cries of mere property. In the wake of the mutilation, the full horror of Nero's plan was unveiled. The emperor announced his intention to marry Sporus in a public ceremony, treating the traumatized youth as a substitute for his beloved Poppaea. This was no marriage as understood by Roman law or custom, but a grotesque parody that violated every social, religious, and legal norm of the empire. Sporus was rechristened Sabina after the deceased empress and was draped in the finest feminine garments, adorned with jewels that had once graced Poppaea herself. The imperial household was ordered to treat Sporus as the empress, addressing him with feminine titles and observing the elaborate protocols befitting an imperial consort. The wedding ceremony was a spectacle of imperial madness, performed before the horrified eyes of Roman society. Sporus, barely recognizable in his elaborate attire, was forced to endure the rituals of Roman marriage, while the emperor played the role of the adoring groom. Contemporary accounts describe the event as both magnificent and deeply disturbing. the splendor of a legitimate imperial wedding obscuring the horrifying reality of what was truly occurring. Guests were compelled to participate in the charade, offering congratulations and gifts while privately recoiling at the emperor's depraved theatrics. In the aftermath of this bizarre union, Sporus was paraded through Rome as Nero's empress, compelled to appear at public gatherings and ceremonies in his fabricated feminine guise. The young man, now entirely reliant on the emperor's favor, had no choice but to fulfill his assigned role. He was forced to accompany Nero to the theater, official functions, and private banquets, where he would be displayed as a prized possession, a living monument to a dead woman. The psychological impact of this existence of being forced to impersonate another, a figure whose death may have been caused by the very man now claiming to cherish her memory, must have been devastating beyond comprehension. During these public appearances, Roman citizens witnessed the unsettling sight of their emperor escorted by a figure who appeared to be a beautiful young woman, yet knowing the dreadful truth behind the elaborate illusion. Some historians suggest that, while accustomed to imperial eccentricities, the Roman populace was deeply disturbed by this particular spectacle. The sight of Sporus, adorned in the regalia of an empress, but bearing the subtle telltale signs of his true nature, and his enforced transformation, served as a constant reminder of the depths to which their emperor had sunk. It was a living embodiment of power's ability to corrupt not just the soul, but the very fabric of reality. The relationship between Nero and Sporus, if it could be termed that, was defined by the emperor's possessive fixation and the young man's utter powerlessness. Nero treated Sporus as both a cherished wife and a prized possession, showering him with gifts and adoration, while simultaneously stripping him of any identity beyond his function as Poppaea's replacement. The emperor would call Sporus by his dead wife's name, address him as if he were the woman he had lost, and expect him to respond accordingly. This psychological torment, the unrelenting demand to embody another while his own self was systematically erased, represented a form of cruelty far exceeding physical harm. Ancient sources offer glimpses into the unsettling nature of this enforced relationship. Suetonius recounts Nero taking Sporus on tours of Greece, presenting him to foreign dignitaries and Greek aristocrats as his empress. These voyages must have been particularly agonizing for Sporus, as he was compelled to maintain his feminine facade in unfamiliar surroundings, among strangers who either believed the lie or were forced to feign acceptance. The constant performance, the inability to ever shed the mask or express his true feelings, created a prison of identity from which there was no escape. The emperor's treatment of Sporus further revealed the extent of his own psychological instability. Nero's affection for Poppaea had been possessive and often violent during her lifetime, and his connection with her surrogate mirrored this dangerous intensity. The emperor would erupt in fits of rage if Sporus failed to perfectly replicate the memory of his deceased wife, punishing him for failures that existed only within Nero's deranged mind. Yet the emperor could also be gentle and generous, showering Sporus with opulent gifts and treating him with the tenderness he had once shown Poppaea, creating a cycle of abuse and reward that must have been psychologically crippling. As the months passed, the bizarre nature of this arrangement became increasingly evident to everyone in the imperial household. Servants and courtiers were forced to navigate the treacherous etiquette of addressing Sporus as empress while knowing the truth of his plight. They witnessed the daily humiliations, the unending need to maintain a feminine persona, and the devastating impact it had on the young man. Some may have felt pity, others revulsion, but all were complicit in perpetuating the elaborate fiction that had become the foundation of Nero's sanity. The strain of this existence was palpable in every aspect of Sporus's daily life. He was compelled to wear women's attire at all times, to speak in a manner deemed suitable for an empress, and to engage in activities and conversations that reinforced his assigned identity. The surgical mutilation he had suffered made certain aspects of this performance easier to maintain, yet it also served as a perpetual physical reminder of what had been taken from him. Every movement, every gesture, every word had to be meticulously calculated to maintain the illusion that he was indeed the woman Nero wished him to be. The political ramifications of Nero's actions were not lost on the Roman Senate and the broader aristocracy. The emperor's marriage to Sporus was perceived as yet another indication of his escalating instability and his contempt for Roman tradition and values. While few dared to openly criticize the emperor, private conversations and correspondence from the era reveal the shock and disgust felt by many Romans. The spectacle of their emperor parading a castrated boy dressed as his dead wife served as a potent symbol of the moral decay that had infiltrated the highest echelons of government. This situation persisted for years, with Sporus trapped in his role as Nero's ersatz empress, unable to escape or even articulate his true feelings about his circumstances. The psychological damage inflicted by years of enforced identity erasure, coupled with the physical trauma of his castration and the constant stress of maintaining an elaborate deception, took a visibly increasing toll. Contemporary accounts suggest that Sporus became increasingly withdrawn and melancholic, yet he had little choice but to continue playing his assigned role. The emperor's attachment to Sporus became so complete that he seemed to genuinely believe, at times, that he had somehow resurrected his beloved Poppaea. This delusion fostered moments of unsettling tenderness between the two, while simultaneously amplifying the horror of Sporus's situation. He was not simply acting a part, he was expected to become someone else entirely, to surrender his own identity so completely that even he might forget who he had once been. The psychological complexities of this relationship, with its blend of affection, obsession, cruelty, and delusion, defied easy categorization even by the standards of an era accustomed to imperial excess. As Nero's reign progressed, political tensions throughout the empire reached a critical point. The emperor's theatrical pursuits, his neglect of governance, and his increasingly erratic behavior had alienated many of his supporters and emboldened his enemies. Military commanders in various provinces began to question their allegiance to an emperor who seemed more interested in cross-dressing with a castrated boy than in governing the vast territories under his command. The sight of Sporus draped in imperial regalia and treated as an empress became emblematic of everything that was wrong with Nero's leadership. In 68 AD, the political situation imploded. The Praetorian Guard, the Senate, and several provincial governors declared their opposition to Nero's continued rule. Faced with universal rejection and the certainty of a painful death if captured, the emperor fled Rome with a small contingent of loyal followers, including Sporus. The young man, who had been afforded no choice in his original fate, now found himself bound to a failing emperor, his own survival dependent on the whims of a man who had already proven capable of any cruelty to fulfill his desires. The final days of Nero's reign were marked by chaos and terror. As news of rebellions and defections reached the imperial party, the emperor's behavior grew increasingly unhinged. He spoke alternately of grand escape plans and theatrical schemes for a dramatic final performance. Throughout this period, Sporus remained by his side, still adorned in feminine attire, still playing the part of the devoted empress, even as the empire crumbled around them. The young man must have understood that his fate was inextricably linked to that of the emperor who had destroyed his life, and that Nero's downfall would likely mean his own destruction as well. When Nero finally committed suicide in June 68 AD, reportedly with the assistance of his secretary Epaphroditus, Sporus was left to face an uncertain destiny. The emperor's death did not deliver the young man from bondage. Instead, it marked the commencement of a new phase of his nightmare. As one of the most conspicuous symbols of Nero's reign, Sporus represented both a living testament to imperial excess and a potentially valuable political asset. The various factions vying for power in the aftermath of Nero's demise would each have their own designs for the young man who had been forced to impersonate an empress. In the immediate aftermath of Nero's death, Sporus was passed from one powerful figure to another, treated as a trophy rather than a human being with his own desires and agency. The new emperor, Galba, reportedly took possession of Sporus along with other remnants of Nero's household. This transfer was not an act of rescue or liberation. It was simply another transaction in which Sporus had no voice or choice. The young man, who had once been a free citizen, then a mutilated plaything, now became a symbol of conquest and political legitimacy for whoever could claim him. Under Galba's rule, Sporus' situation remained precarious and humiliating. The new emperor, while lacking Nero's theatrical obsessions, still saw value in possessing this living reminder of his predecessor's reign. Sporus was maintained in a state of luxurious captivity, still expected to uphold elements of his feminine presentation, but no longer treated as an actual empress. This liminal existence, neither fully male nor female, neither free nor enslaved, neither honored nor entirely discarded, must have been psychologically devastating for someone who had already endured years of identity destruction. The political instability that followed Nero's death, the period known as the Year of the Four Emperors, meant that Sporus' fate remained uncertain as different factions rose and fell in rapid succession. When Galba was assassinated in January 69 AD, Sporus once again found himself transferred to new ownership. The young man had become a kind of imperial heirloom, passed from ruler to ruler like a piece of prized furniture or a work of art. Each transition brought new uncertainties and new degradations as he was forced to adapt to the expectations and whims of each successive master. The Emperor Otho, who briefly held power after Galba's assassination, reportedly treated Sporus with relative compassion, perhaps recognizing something of his own precarious position in the young man's situation. However, Otho's reign lasted only a few months before he too was defeated and forced to take his own life. Once again, Sporus faced the terrifying prospect of being claimed by yet another new ruler, each transition stripping away a little more of whatever dignity and identity he had managed to retain through his ordeal. It was under the reign of Vitellius that Sporus' situation reached its final, most degrading stage. Vitellius, having defeated Otho and claimed the purple for himself, apparently decided that Sporus would serve as entertainment for the Roman populace. The emperor planned to force the young man to appear in the arena, not as a gladiator, but as a participant in a grotesque reenactment of the abduction of Proserpina, the mythological tale of a young maiden's rape and capture. This plan represented the ultimate desecration. Sporus would be compelled to play the role of a woman being sexually assaulted for the amusement of thousands of spectators. The prospect of this final humiliation proved unbearable for Sporus. After years of forced feminization, identity erasure, and sexual exploitation, the thought of being violated in public as a spectacle for the Roman mob was the breaking point. Ancient sources record that Sporus chose death over enduring this ultimate degradation, taking his own life before Vitellius could enact his cruel scheme. In his final act, Sporus reclaimed the one thing that had been denied him throughout his ordeal, the power to make a choice about his destiny. The suicide of Sporus marked the end of one of the most disturbing episodes in Roman imperial history. His death was not widely mourned, nor was it considered a significant political event. He had been reduced to such a state of dehumanization that his passing was noted primarily as a minor inconvenience to Vitellius's plans. Yet in choosing death over further degradation, Sporus exhibited a courage and dignity that had been systematically denied him throughout his adult life. His final act was both a rejection of the role he had been forced to play and an assertion of his fundamental humanity. The story of Sporus compels us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of power and the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. In a world where absolute authority could transform a free young man into a living doll, where identity itself could be surgically and psychologically altered to serve the whims of a madman, we glimpse the darkest potential of unchecked power. Sporus' tragedy was not simply personal. It was symptomatic of a system that valued human beings only to the extent that they served the desires of those in positions of authority. The enduring legacy of Sporus' story serves as a reminder that behind the grand narratives of empire and conquest lie countless individual tragedies, stories of individuals who were powerless against the forces that shaped their lives. His experience highlights the particular vulnerabilities of those who lived on the fringes of Roman society. The freedmen, slaves, and others whose lives could be casually destroyed by the powerful. The fact that his story was preserved at all suggests its exceptional nature, yet it also hints that similar abuses, perhaps less dramatic but no less devastating, were likely commonplace in a society built on rigid hierarchies and the absolute power of the emperor. Modern readers might question how such cruelty was possible, how a society could tolerate or even celebrate such systematic dehumanization. Yet Sporus' story also reveals the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit, the ability to endure unimaginable suffering while retaining some core sense of self. His final choice, tragic as it was, represented a triumph of sorts, a refusal to be utterly broken even by forces that seemed capable of rewriting reality itself. In remembering Sporus, we not only acknowledge his suffering, but also honor his ultimate act of defiance against those who sought to completely erase his humanity. So, the story of Sporus, though steeped in the darkness of Roman imperial excess, ultimately whispers a powerful truth. Even in the face of unimaginable cruelty and the systematic stripping away of one's identity, the human spirit can find a way to assert itself, to reclaim a final piece of dignity. It's a chilling reminder of power's potential for abuse, but also an inspiring testament to our innate capacity for resilience. What are your thoughts on Sporus' story? Does it change how you view the Roman Empire, or perhaps even power dynamics in our own world? I'd love to hear your perspectives, questions, or anything else that resonated with you in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. And if you found this exploration of Sporus' life and legacy thought-provoking, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future deep dives into history's compelling and often forgotten narratives. Thanks for watching.